Hello viewers, good morning to you as Delhi is completely fogged out this morning. But there's a lot of expectations and anticipation from the eighth full budget of the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, her consecutive budget, eighth consecutive budget, and that is certainly the big highlight. She has created history already in being the only finance minister to have achieved that rare feat. Before that, it was Morarji Desai who presented 6 consecutive budgets. So Nirmala Sitharaman has a huge task at hand, and there is something very unique about Indians and this budget document, because by 11 a.m. Indians across the country will be glued in to their television sets to see if there is some relief for them, some relief for particularly the taxpayers, the middle class. Though the Prime Minister did hint at some kind of benefits coming in for the middle class in particular, where he said, "May Goddess Lakshmi be kind to the middle class and also to the poor." Joining me this morning at Vijay Chowk is a very esteemed panel which has managed to arrive early morning despite Delhi being completely fogged out, as I said. Arun Nehru, Member of Parliament of the DMK, is right here. We have Soumya Misra, founder of Avatar Skincare Technologies, a startup. We have Mitali, who's a chief economist and founder of Nikor Associates, and also we have Sajjan Kumar, who is an analyst. Before I bring in the guests, a quick word from Sunil Prabhu, who joins me from the Finance Ministry, North Block. That's where Finance Minister is expected to arrive around 9:15 with the Bahi Khata. You know, that tradition which changed from the briefcase to the Bahi Khata, the red, cloth, which will have the tablet, which will be a digital transition also, which India has made. A quick word from you, Sunil. I know it's very, very cold this morning, but certainly there is some kind of relief that the middle class is definitely expecting from this budget.
Well, not immediately, not exactly, but definitely a big, big step. It's going to be an end of the colonial past. As you said, Nirmala Sitharaman is now presenting what is going to be the 8th consecutive budget, which is a history of sorts. What we are going to see is the end of the Indian Income Tax Act 1961. What has been done, attempted to do, is every time to amend that act. Now there will be an introduction of the Direct Tax Code. Nirmala Sitharaman has given those final touches. It will be announced. It will come as a separate bill, hopefully before the end of the budget session, which goes into recess on the 13th of February. So it's definitely a big day for India, for everybody else, because with this, you really don't require Parliament to once again, every time, have this entire thing. You can do it even through a schedule. Those formalities will have to work and see the details once that bill comes out, but definitely it's a historic day. As you rightly said, this is something that the Prime Minister as well as the President hinted about, the fact that you will, hopefully it will be good for the poor and the middle class. There is an election going on in Delhi, so they will have to keep that in mind. Having said that, the other, of course, most important aspect is about allowing growth to take place, something that is really required at this stage, apart from capital expenditure, and more importantly, ensuring that the poorest of the poor continue to get the much required reform. So it's definitely a big day. We'll wait and see as Nirmala Sitharaman goes to the President of India. It's required, Marianne, just as a small factoid, that she has to sign off on that finance bill before it's presented in Parliament. And so she's already will be given some excerpts of the copy, and her team will tell her, and then Nirmala Sitharaman will explain that, and of course she signs that financial bill before she takes it to the cabinet at 10 o'clock, which will meet, where those broad outlays will be told, and then of course subsequently it will be presented in the Lok Sabha.
All right, Sunil, thank you so much. We'll be joined by Uma Sudhir also in just a bit. But before that, a quick word from Arun Nehru. Mr. Nehru, what do you think is the significance of a budget in the lives of Indians? You know, we invariably wait for kya cheez mehenga hua, what has got costlier, what has got cheaper.
I think with more and more Indians moving into the formal economy, and the budget kind of sets the tone of what to spend and what not to spend, and thereby changing the fortunes of so many entrepreneurs and companies along the way. So the formal economy is really good for a lot of people in one sense that it gives you a clear structure in life, and second, budget kind of defines the tone and the pace in which it's done, specifically for job creation. So I think the budget kind of gives us an encouragement to do the right thing if the government sets the the agenda right.
Yes, I'm going to ask the women here about the Bahi Khata and the significance of Nirmala Sitharaman as the finance minister. But a word from Uma Sudhir, who is joining us from Hyderabad. Uma, how does it look early morning in Hyderabad? What are the expectations of the people there?
So very good morning to all our viewers, and yes, I'm here with a group of senior citizens, quite enthusiastic I should say, because after the Prime Minister spoke about invoking Ma Lakshmi's blessings, there is a lot of hope perhaps that the middle class is going to benefit. What are your thoughts? Very quickly we'll go across.
Number one, I feel pensioners should be exempted from paying any type of income tax. Number two, the railway concessions which the government has taken away during COVID period, it should be restored to all senior citizens. That is my expectation.
Okay. Well spoken, like a senior citizen, demanding the tax cut and the pensions relief. Yeah.
मेरा नाम राजेश जैन है। मैं ये चाहता हूँ कि ये बजट में सबको, चाहे बिजनेसमैन हो, चाहे नौकरी पेशा वाला आदमी हो, सबके लिए ये बजट लाभदायक हो, सबके लिए हितकारी हो, सबके लिए फ़ायदेमंद हो। यही चाहता हूँ कि इसमें किसी को भी जनता को कोई भी तकलीफ ना हो।
I would prefer the senior citizen getting insurance, health insurance benefits.
That becomes usually the
very difficult part when people are admitted in the hospital. They don't have the capacity to pay.
See, the senior citizen savings scheme, many senior citizens are subsisting only on interest income. So for their benefit, this entire income from senior citizen savings scheme should be made tax-free. That is one. Number two, now we have seen how DeepSeek and all that funded by the government has come. India should also emulate and give tax incentives for startups which are engaged in AI software, technological upgradation, so that we can also develop technology to that level.
Absolutely. DeepSeek is certainly put our thing, but Mr. Ashwini Vaishnav has mentioned that India is also investing over 10,000 crore rupees, and hopefully we will have some results in 10 months. Ma'am.
Hello, as a super senior single female woman, not from the low BPL community class, I would expect that she gives us more concession for non-pensioners. I'm a non-pensioner. Hence, for her to improve our quality of life, more concessions should be offered in every which way. The interest rates should be increased, at least for super seniors, not the 0.05%. And similarly, facilities should be granted at the railway stations, ticket counters, and definite concessions in the air travel and the train travel. Thank you.
My husband will speak.
Yeah, I'm Sudhakar. My concern is about capital gains tax. Last year's budget, the short-term capital gains and tax has been increased from 10 to 12.5%, and even long-term from 15 to 20. They should restore to their old rates, because already investors are paying, apart from brokerage, securities transaction tax, exchange expenses, stamp duty, so many taxes. And
Very important point. Many people hoping that capital gains tax is brought down.
Hello, my name is PM Reddy. I am ex-banker. Actually, we are facing pension long back. It is due for revision, but they are not doing for last 20 years. So I expect bankers to get more pension.
Okay.
Thank you.
Madam, every year, my name is Shankar. Every year the tax relief is giving for middle class people.
This time hope seems to be high on it.
High, we are expecting high because I'm a high man taxpayer. Standard deduction should be increased, and also, as rightly said by one person, that railway concession should be given for senior citizens. That is also very, very important point. Standard deduction and the percentage of taxpayers must be further reduced for better administration.
Okay, so tax relief, pensioners should not get tax, and more concessions to the elderly citizens in the country. That's something that perhaps resonates with many seniors across the country who have now their own financial resources and hoping that Nirmala Sitharaman takes care of them as well. When the Prime Minister spoke about the poor and the middle class, hopefully the senior citizens also will benefit from Lakshmi Devi's blessings. Back to you, Mariam.
All right. Thank you, Uma, for that quick update and also a lot of reactions that you got us from citizens as to what they expect. This is, of course, it's about their lives. How much will change? We'll know about it from 11 a.m. onwards. Let's go back to the guests. Mithali, in 2019, India's first full-time finance minister in Nirmala Sitharaman made a notable departure from what was the briefcase to this Bahi Khata. I mean, it's very much Indian in the sense that the color which has been chosen is red, which is the color of the ledger. I mean, that is how we maintain the accounts. And then it is about maintaining that, account, Bahi Khata, again, as it means book. Bahi is book and Khata means account. So how do you read it, in the sense that this change which happened?
So I think, Maria, first of all, thanks a lot for bringing me here, into this panel. And the fog is clearing, the sun is coming out. And I think in a few hours, we'll also have clarity on what is in the budget.
Yes.
And I think, Nirmala Sitharaman as a finance minister, we've spoken about her a lot over the years. You and I have spoken about her a lot. And she has set her own traditions, her saris, her fashion, even that is something that I think I personally look up to. And what she's done with this, combination of digitization and tradition. The Bahi Khata, the tablet in that red, in that red little briefcase that she carries, is a clear signal of modernity and tradition mixed in one. And that's what India wants to stand for today, because as we move towards this vision of a Viksit Bharat by 2047, the whole idea is how can we actually bring in digitization more and more. And I really am looking forward today to seeing digitization being announced as a key theme across our sectors, particularly for employment creation. Because this is the area where we have to see much more effort from the government to improve the employability of our population and our youth.
Yes, because after that entire talk around AI framework, what happens in AI, there's a lot of curiosity. And also the economic survey has highlighted almost setting a roadmap of what should we expect. Red, Soumya, is the color of power. It is the color of strength. It's a color of wealth. And that's what will be again on display in an hour from now when we'll be seeing that photo opportunity of the finance minister.
Absolutely. I think, from briefcase to that red-laden file. Now, the good part is red was also known for red tapeism. And what we are also expecting is that, the digital inside the red, that concept would also reflect in the budget, in the sense the world is talking about, how ease of business should improve, how, more benefits in terms of compliance, regulation, could be given to the companies for the businesses to thrive, for more FDI to come into the country. We are in a peculiar place today where China +1 is seeming to be even stronger than ever, with Trump taking over, with Chinese economy not doing so well, Europe not stable, and hopefully with that red tape losing its older prejudices that it stands for, bureaucracy. It stands for unnecessary regulations which can hamper companies. The digital part of it will take over more. The modern part of it will take over more, and hopefully our finance minister would come up with benefits and incentives and compliance measures which are in favor of businesses and startups like us.
Yes, I'm going to talk about startups. and also about, cooperative federalism, because there's a lot of expectations of various states with Mr. Nehru. But a word from Sajjan here. Sajjan, Prime Minister's remarks coming a day before the budget, which is today, actually has made particularly the middle class very curious, because little was talked about them. Every budget, let's be clear, if there is an impending election or it comes in the middle of a election season, it invariably talks about that particular constituency. We are looking at Delhi elections. Delhi goes to polls in 5 days from now, and hence the significance cannot be missed. And when we say middle class, it's a constituency which is seen as very much invested in the tax framework of India.
Yeah, precisely. And middle class is also the what you call the golden goose of economy. I mean, expanding middle class base is a prime condition and also an indicator. And politically in 2024 election, BJP got a feedback that a class that has been backing it up strongly for a decade was not that kind of invested in backing the party, and that shows a sort of pessimism. And now Delhi election is there, you find that there is a clear, any ground study, you find a class divide, So therefore we are entering into a state of economy and schemes wherein it is happening middle class versus, what you call freebies or the populist policies. And many a times on the ground, the middle class is having the perception that while it is okay to go for the populist schemes, it should not be done in a way wherein they feel that they are paying for that. They are detrimental, their interest is not. So that is why this time, yesterday, if you go by the word count, it was around 8 times that the president uttered the word middle class, which is way more. So that is why it's a right feedback, So middle class centric thing is also about not just about individuals, about the tax slabs of 20 to 30 lakhs should be considered, because there are more tax compliances, tax base is increasing, so that can be done. It's also about the startups and other, wherein the first generation entrepreneurs coming from the middle class, they also would be expecting that the government takes, their account. Now for the BJP and for the government, or for any government for that matter, for a finance minister, the word is harmonizing the contending interests, how to create a balance. That is the biggest challenge. Middle class versus the poor, women, farmers, youths, and lot many other segments of the society who need, the cash in their hand, because then you also expect the consumption should go, up, be it FMCG or durables, and for that you need to give more cash into the hands, but that should not be into a frame wherein middle class versus the populist schemes. Yeah.
Yes. Mr. Nehru, income tax slabs haven't changed since 2020. And there is a growing clamor that the finance minister does have that elbow room for giving some kind of relief to them. With the indication or signal that came from the Prime Minister yesterday, and do you think the government has that option?
Yes, they do have that option because two things. Right? The number of taxpayers below 10 lakhs forms a large portion of numerically, right? But the amount of taxes that they contribute to the country is below 18% of the overall number. So although it seems that, as he suggested, the middle class needs relief, which is very important. So the compared to the previous years, you have something that is extremely strong, which is the GST, right? So the middle class is already paying through GST. So even if the government decides to give that relief, the fair relief that is being sought out, it's already being paid for by the middle class through an indirect taxation. So they do have good room to give that middle class some room, yes.
And what are the expectations of Tamil Nadu?
So coming from, the southern state of Tamil Nadu, there was also this article today morning where 4 states in the country, including Tamil Nadu, contribute to 43% of the GDP.
That's right.
So as a manufacturing state, as a state that originates goods and services, we seriously need that capacity building infrastructure from the central government that's been long sought after, right? Especially metro rails, highways that are being built up. And there's more room for factories to be coming there because you have the social and educational infrastructure that is there in Tamil Nadu. So a lot of schemes that have been pending for a long time, I think it's time for the central government to realize that investing in Tamil Nadu is actually getting back money faster. I'll tell you one data point. So national highways in Tamil Nadu, right, the payback time is 4.5 years in Tamil Nadu. And some of the northern states, it's 12 years plus. So you have more value for money in Tamil Nadu in that sense, just only taking financially.
Okay, so I will ask you more on Andhra Pradesh versus other southern states. Do you think there'll be a bias towards an alliance partner vis-a-vis other states? Are you anticipating that as well, Mr. Nehru?
That is just natural in politics. They are their ally, and they have to, they are, without their support, I think they will need their support.
As they say, coalition compulsion.
Yeah.
During UPA, it became the big word and the buzzword.
So, for example, 2 weeks ago, they did more funding towards Polavaram project.
That's right.
And we have been asking for interlinking from the north for a very, very long time, right? And the amount of area and irrigation is much larger, in the southern states. So I think once, or Polavaram, they should actually connect the southern states too.
All right. A word from my friend Aishwarya, who's joining us from outside Finance Minister's home. Finance Minister is expected to visit the President of India. That official endorsement from President is important. It's part of the protocol, part of the procedure. But where is she at the moment? At her home? And can we expect the two MOSs also to accompany her from her home, or will they be joining her from the North Block?
Well, the latest update is that MOS Finance Pankaj Chaudhary has left his residence, and he is expected to reach at Finance Ministry very soon. Let me show you these quick visuals from the Finance Minister's residence at Safdarjung Road, and she'll be leaving post 8:30 something that we have been told, and she'll be directly reaching to the Finance Ministry. First, she will be meeting her colleagues at the Finance Ministry, the officials who had worked day and night to prepare the Union Budget 25-26, and finally she will be going for that photo op opportunity outside the Finance Ministry, and later also will be visiting the Rashtrapati Bhavan, and then she will proceed to the Parliament at 11 a.m. Something that Finance Minister will be presenting her 8th consecutive budget. And also something which would be very interesting to see is the messaging that Prime Minister and President had given yesterday as far as the middle class and the lower class are concerned. Also, the economic survey which stated that 6.3 to 6.8% would be the range that India's economy will be growing in 25-26. Which is also expected in this budget as well. So a lot of expectation, but all eyes would be on Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman as we are reporting live from outside her residence, and she will be leaving post 8:30 is something that we know so far.
All right, Aishwarya, thank you so much for joining us. Viewers, a quick break, and this is your destination for all the news on the Budget 2025. Stay with us. Fundamentals of India's economy remains robust with strong external account and stable private consumption. That's what the economic survey talked about, and today is the day of the budget. Let's begin and continue with this conversation even as we wait for Finance Minister to exit her residence and head to Rashtrapati Bhavan. Mithali, we have been talking about AI, and interestingly, in this budget in particular, there has been focus on it. And do you think, India cannot always be seen, continue to wait for other countries? We have seen China and US take a lead in the AI space. It has to make the move because potential aside, everybody talks about India has great potential of leading the AI industry, but when it comes to real movement, that has to happen.
So I think, Maria, there were two numbers in the economic survey which link to your question. The first number in the economic survey is on the headline growth. The economic survey has clearly laid out that if we want to reach the target of, 2047 Viksit Bharat, we have to see 10 years of growth above 8% of GDP, right? That's the first number. The second number is that for our youth, every year we need to generate 7.8 or say 8 million jobs. Now, to achieve both of these targets in an economy today, in a global environment today, where we are being, in a global trade war maybe, or there might be tariffs, our exports will be impacted, our competitiveness in the global economy will be impacted. We cannot compete globally if we don't invest in digital economies, if we don't invest in workers who are digitally skilled and employable. So in that, of course, artificial intelligence is a key tool, because then you actually are creating a massive youth workforce coming from states like, of course, the southern states are already ahead, but we have to take the whole country along. And this youth workforce is not only meant for Indian AIs, but also to work in the AI technologies and companies across the world. We've seen Indians have been leading companies like Google and others. We want to see more and more Indian workforce deployed even in China, in DeepSeek. Why not? Yes. So we have to train our people for that. And for that, we need a massive AI skilling program.
Okay, as someone who is running a startup yourself, do you think, Soumya, that India at the moment is not really prepared? We really do not understand what will this adoption of AI mean in the job market, how it will change it completely. There is a lot of fear associated with it. Will it be displacing people, replacing, certain industries, particularly the services industry?
I think that a lot of work will be taken over by AI, and in our startup we see greater reliance on various AI portals and tools to do some of the work which was done by people before. So there'll be some impact, but I do believe that in a country like India, AI picking up globally would also create opportunities, because it's reliant on data and training the models. Now there's innovation happening there, but like just to run the AI economy globally for the next few years would also require a lot of work behind AI. So I think from that perspective, in terms of supporting AI, I think India, and with its talent and with its large educated English-speaking population, is a strength. But what needs to be done is to also lead AI, or be one of the leaders who are innovating in that area. I think in the last budget, 1,000 crore deep tech fund was announced, and that the deployment of that fund would start seeing the light of the day starting this year. More such initiatives which are specifically focused on global trends, especially on the tech side, for us to not be the supporters but to leaders, would really help.
Yes, and Sajjan, innovation, inclusion, and investment. Prime Minister spoke about these 3 I's, and he said that will be the basis of the roadmap for economic activities. And in this, AI becomes important. It is about innovation. Indian startups, Indian tech have to innovate in that space, and for that a corpus has to be created.
Exactly, and we have the demographic dividend. If you see the tier 1, tier 2 cities, even in rural areas, the kind of investment into uses of the AI, uses of, say, for example, ChatGPT, which is becoming sort of a headache for academia and many of the educational institutions. But see the kind of propensity, the ease with which the new generation, I'll say you have Dalit Gen Zs, you have rural Gen Zs, you have tribal Gen Zs. I mean, that way you have to expand. So there is, since starting from computer to digitization, we were a bit late in catching up, but once we caught up, we were ahead of the curve, So that is why once you create a corpus, we do have one of the youngest, democracies across the world. India has the inclination and the potential to...
Sajjan, just hold on to your thoughts, because the finance minister is now leaving a residence, cutting across to Aishwarya. Aishwarya, the photo opportunity is of course going to happen at the North Block. What can you tell us?
Well, let me show you these quick visuals from Finance Minister's residence. There you can see Nirmala Sitharaman, Finance Minister of our country, leaving from her residence, directly heading towards the North Block where Finance Ministry is. And there she would be meeting first the officials from the Finance Ministry who had worked very hard to prepare the union budget, and from there meeting the MOS Finance Pankaj Chaudhary. Along with him, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will be directly heading to Rashtrapati Bhavan as well. So clearly now Finance Minister had left her residence and directly she'll be reaching at North Block at the Finance Ministry. All eyes would be on the union budget at 11 a.m.
Okay. So the Finance Minister has left her home and she is now headed to North Block. We'll be cutting across to North Block reporter at the moment, Sunil, in just a bit. But please go ahead, Sajjan.
Indian society always have a natural propensity, for innovation. All we need is some infrastructure, some corpus of funds. So your government needs to facilitate that. You don't need to kind of give them entire thing. Just, trigger it and it will take off. And that sort of a propensity is visible. You go to the remotest areas of the Northeast, to any rural area, they're the kind of, once there is a new technology, they get hold of it. And then the,
yes. The pace at which
ease and pace. Yeah, that way.
Absolutely. Arun Nehru?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Role of state governments in AI.
So what happens is state governments, by virtue of being the local guardian of so many factors, will also become the local guardian of the data that is being generated or the pace at which it's generated. So Tamil Nadu, for example, almost all of the government services are getting digitized now. So with the learning curve of the Tamil Nadu government, the union government can learn to implement schemes which is much more efficient and in reaching the people, because the gap between the government deciding to do something and reaching the people, in most places it doesn't even reach people. But I think from the learning curve of the the digital transformation in southern states, especially Tamil Nadu, I think the union government can learn and hence can serve the people better without with the time gap.
You're of the opinion that the states have taken a lead already?
Yes, in many cases, yes. In many cases, especially if you see most of the basic core services in Tamil Nadu is digital, right? It's not even paper anymore. And the recent, the middle class, right? Land forms a very big portion. The house and the land forms a very big portion. Almost the entire journey is digital now. They need paper only for cases where they need a backup. Otherwise, the registration and the documentation is completely digital. I think that transformation can help a lot of states in the north learn, from the digital transformation, and we would have done the best case scenarios that is available for them to learn also.
Yes. Yeah. So let's talk about Team Nirmala Sitharaman now, because when the photo opportunity happened yesterday, there were a lot of women who were present around the finance minister. They were perhaps involved in the budget preparation as well. So that certainly is a fascinating journey also in terms of how women have started playing role. They have moved beyond just doing basic calculations at their homes to now, presenting and managing budget of the country.
Absolutely. Maria, so I think when we look at the question of women's labor force participation and women's workforce participation more generally, definitely we can see from the periodic labor force participation survey that the female labor force participation rate has increased from 23% in 2017 to 41% this year. However, I think even the finance ministry and many of the ministries that we've been interacting with at Nikor Associates, they recognize that a lot of this increase has come in sectors like agriculture. It's still concentrated in rural areas, and there is a need to continue supporting women's workforce participation, especially to get them into entrepreneurship, to bridge the digital divide. We all spoke about the digital economy, but women are much less likely. They are actually 3 times less likely to own a smartphone and to be able to operate a smartphone. So at the end of the day, it's very important to bridge that divide. And the second thing which I'd like to highlight is the care economy. And since last 2 years, we've been working with the Ministry of Women, the Ministry of Women taking a lead in setting up what we call as Palna Ghars. Across the country, there's a target to set up 17,000 Palna Ghars within Anganwadis, which are almost functioning like daycare centers, because there is a recognition that women are doing 5.6 hours of unpaid care work every day.
Okay, Mithali, just quickly, a word from Sunil Prabhu, who's joining us now from North Block. That's where Finance Minister has arrived. She is the lady of the moment. I mean, she's carrying the burden of the entire nation at the moment because a lot of expectations and anticipation. Sunil, over to you. What are you seeing?
Well, as we speak, she's just gone in for that final touches to the budget before she goes and gives it to the President of India with her team of officials, the Finance Secretary and Revenue Secretary who's been appointed just recently, who's of course looked after a very critical, important disinvestments, be it of Air India as well as of LIC, the IPO that was required, Mr. Tuin Pandey. He's been appointed the Revenue Secretary and is now going to be the real man behind the scenes in bringing in the direct tax code, which we have been reporting, which will basically stop the Income Tax Act of 1961. Nirmala Sitharaman dressed in a lovely white katha sari, so you can definitely expect a lot of decisions that have been taken. You know, the anticipation is a lot, but definitely in the next financial year, we are definitely not going to have income tax, but a direct tax code, which is going to be a new, a big new for you know, taxpayers like you and me. So that's important. What it does in terms of you know, allowing growth is something that we'll have to wait and see, as well as of course fiscal consolidation. So in a short moment from now, Nirmala Sitharaman, after the photo opportunity here at the North Block, will go to the President of India to tell her the broad contours of the finance bill, get her signature for introduction in the House of the Lok Sabha, and then after briefing her, moves to Parliament, where she will have a, you know, be part of the cabinet meeting, which will give its approval to the union budget and basically the outlay for what is going to be coming in the budget, and then subsequently at 11 o'clock speak in the Lok Sabha, the House of the People, and introduce and not only a budget speech but the finance bill that is required.
Okay, Sunil, we'll come to you in just a few minutes because Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman is now at the North Block giving final touches to the budget, and she's wearing a lovely katha sari.
For Katha, and Bengal is being represented in the sari.
Soumya, you know, the point here is also about employment-linked incentive scheme. The focus has been on it. There are efforts on, because the government of the day realizes that one of the reasons why their number went down, the Modi 3.0 number went down, was because of this buzz around lack of job opportunities or unemployment rate particularly high in the rural market. Then in July budget, they went ahead and you know, announced the internship scheme. How much of that has actually seen the light of the day?
I think it was a good scheme. The results of it would start to show in the near term. But as far as our startup Avatar is concerned, we have people who are availing that apprentice stipend that the government is supporting for them. And with those kind of schemes, it also help us, you know, get in not so employable people, but give them on-the-job training, because the government is supporting it, and I think that was also the intention. So the schemes like these are welcome, because as recruiters we see there is such a wide gap between the talent requirement and talent availability. So we at one point, at one place we have such a large mass which is unemployed, but at the same time, companies and startups are also struggling to find the right talent. So we look forward to more such initiative which just help in bridging the gap where there is population but not employable, and provide them apprentice opportunities the way it was launched in the last budget, provide more upskilling initiatives. I think the last apprentice program, the people who come from there also have to attend an online course and do a particular number of hours based on the discipline that they've chosen, which was a good initiative. But then we can do even more there, and things like AI, digital, and its a widespread penetration, as we discussed, also helps government to enable a lot of that.
So, Sajjan, rural employment, Manrega, the government did come up with a number yesterday. But employment generation also requires greater participation from the private sector.
Precisely. And more importantly, if you see, rural is not agrarian. I mean, this is one of the,
Yes.
conception.
Myths.
Overwhelming portion of the rural is non-agrarian. And the point is that majority of the people who are living in rural landscape, they need to, a kind of being employed into the non-agrarian sector. So therefore, we need measures wherein the non-agrarian sort of initiative should be made the central economic plank into the rural areas. And if you you go into any countryside, you do not find a pure peasant or a pure farmer, They are a part-time peasant, and part-time they're into many other activities. And that is why we need to tap into that untapped terrain, the landscape. Therein also comes the question of the gender workforce participation. And now with the women emerging as a strong political constituency, elections after elections, it is a centrality of the women, and they are being outraged. So there is, as pointed out, we need the reskilling, upskilling, and for that many incentives should be given to the private players also to invoke and employ these skilling measures, wherein the government should encourage that and facilitate that. Yeah.
Okay, so how do you strike the right balance between capital investment and job creation?
I will tell an example, madam, on a
Yes.
Tamil Nadu scale. Right. So the social empowerment is very, very important in this overall topic of creating. So she rightly pointed out that capacity building is absolute. Right. Whatever capital money that's being put in is you need to build capacities. So what Tamil Nadu did, this one scheme where there was a direct benefit transfer to women. Right. So it's Magalir Urimai Thittam. So what this does is it builds capacity of women to enter the workforce and become formal. So on the outside, you might see it's a direct benefit scheme and nothing more. So the capacity building initiatives through the social schemes, as he said, will empower more people to join the workforce and contribute to the economy. So without building capacity, so capacity building is not only roads, highways, airports, and dams, waterways, pipeways. It's a lot more connected with the social engineering that is being done in southern state of Tamil Nadu. So capacity building, I think, as madam pointed out, like education, employability, and social inclusion forms a major portion so that they get represented in the formal economy. Now, there are, as he said, it's rural is not agrarian. So in Tamil Nadu, after this scheme, 55% of the women are now in part of the formal network. And that money gets circulated. And hence the growth is much larger. So now you have a capacity of women who are able to replace, who are able to be in the formal economy and contribute. So I think that nuance of actually placing your money in a correct social scheme will actually work wonders. Because one, you're employing them. Second, the nation gets built also.
So you cannot really dismiss that as freebies.
No, you cannot. You cannot. So it has to have a social impact, economic impact, and in fact more representative of the formal economy. So people might just brush off that as freebies, but if you look into the impact, if there are data from Bloomberg also on how this scheme has actually impacted workforce in Tamil Nadu and how it has increased the tax base, in a state of Tamil Nadu which is already saturated. So I think they coming into the formal economy, actually they feel empowered also. So that's the, I think the bottom line is empowering people to take decisions and be formal economy also.
Okay, so to the startup lady here, startups have been getting a lot of incentives in the past. but has it led to more startups being created here, or is there some degree of disillusionment as well? There has been, I've spoken to several startup owners who are also of the opinion that single window clearances and the support that they are used to hearing about doesn't really formalize into much on the ground.
I think, of course, there are always areas of improvement, but this government has done a brilliant job of building that startup ecosystem. Now, youth today has aspirations of building a business and be job creators versus what it used to be, say, 7-8 years back, where the aspiration of every middle class household was that mera beta meri beti ki bas naukri lag jaye, sarkari naukri lag jaye. So I think we have come a long way from there and emerged as the third largest global startup ecosystem. And I think a lot of work has happened in terms of the compliance breaks that startups get in terms of income tax relief in the first 5 years, exemption from labor authorities intrusion. However, the challenges remain still. There is a lot more that could be done in helping the founders like us to focus only on building versus figuring out when the GST certificate would be coming, or dealing with MCD authorities. So I think those kind of things take away a lot of focus and mind space, energy. But I do feel that this government has the heart at the right place as far as startups are concerned. In every budget we've seen some gifts that have come for start. In the last budget, it was on angel tax. This time we are expecting that the double taxation on ESOPs might get some relief. We are expecting more incentive plans. We are expecting more funds to be launched, like the Deep Tech Fund. So lots of hope from lady in Katha Sari today.
Okay, let's start wrapping up. And I'll give it the last word to the two women on the panel.
So thanks, Maria. I think in terms of my budget expectations overall, one thing we haven't spoken about today is around infrastructure investments. And I do think that continuing the trend of the last 3 or 4 years, we will see a renewed focus on infrastructure investment. Last year, we saw almost 11 lakh crores was allocated for capital infrastructure. This year also continuing the national logistics policy, continuing the maritime vision 2040, continuing with railway upgradation, continuing with roadways and the Bharatmala program. These programs, we don't speak about them that often anymore, but they have actually helped in building that backbone of connecting rural markets to urban consumption centers and also improving exports, which have actually gone up to almost 10% of GDP. So I think one part of this is likely to continue. The second part, which I want more focus on this year, is around urban infrastructure development. So when we are looking at our cities, more than 50-60% of our population is going to be living in cities in the next decade. And we're going to start seeing people coming from even, tier 5, tier 6 to tier 3, tier 4, tier 2. So it's not only about a Delhi, Mumbai, or, investing in a Delhi and Mumbai, but it's about investing in the tier 2 cities today. And there we need to start seeing 3 or 4 very basic things start to happen. One is around transit-oriented development. And this is something that was highlighted in the last budget as well, where we talked about the fact that more commercial development around transit centers like metros and even bus stations needs to happen. And the second is around clean air. I mean, we are sitting in Delhi today. It's slightly better. It's slightly better this year, but that's only because there have been measures that have been taken by the central and state authorities.
Grab 4.
We need to start planning for air pollution.
Okay. Quick word from you, sir. 30 seconds. What are your expectations?
So 2 things. In fact, only one thing, jobs. Just make sure that there are enough jobs available. As he said, 78 lakh jobs must be created in net every year, and do it through SMEs. Please do it through SMEs, not corporates. Corporates can employ 250 people or 500 people, but every SME employs 5 people. So they are the backbone. They are the ones who feed the economy. Please create these jobs and incentives through SMEs so that the economy can be much better.
Thank you so much for your time here, Arun Nehru, Soumya, Mitali and Sajan for joining us this morning. A quick break and then we return.